So I'm going to hit record now. So if anyone's uncomfortable with that, please feel free to leave. Otherwise, this will be recorded and made available to folks who are in attendance to today, and we'll send it out and put it up on our website as well. But welcome everyone. I'm Heather Drake, Maine Public Health Association's membership manager, and I thank you all for joining us and for our presenters today. Today we are hosting a presentation on emergency preparedness, how to make sure your home is prepared for an emergency, both during before the emergency happens and during the emergency as well. Today's webinar is in recognition of National Preparedness Month, which happens every September to raise awareness about the importance of preparing for disasters and emergencies that could happen at any time. So today we are joined by Caity Hager, who is the Emergency Management Coordinator for Portland Public Health, and Hayley Prevatt, who is the Research and Evaluation Program Coordinator, also with Portland Public Health. And they'll be talking to us about the importance of preparing for natural disasters and unexpected high intensity weather events, which is particularly important always, but also as we're experiencing an ever-changing climate, which impacts emergencies and increases their intensity and frequency. So really excited to have Caity and Hayley here today, and I will let you take it over. Oh, and one other thing, we will be taking, there's 2 sections, so we'll pause at the end of the first section and take questions, and we'll take questions at the end as well. But in the meantime, if you could just remain muted, but feel free to turn your video on if you'd like to. And now I'll turn it over to you both.
Thank you, Heather. Caity, do we just want to jump right into that first slide? Perfect. So we also today are going to be using the annotate tool that Zoom has available to us. And so I just wanted to quickly walk through how to use that tool. And so at the top of the screen, you should see something like Hayley is sharing her screen or something like that. And there should be some type of like drop down at the top of your screen where it will give you a lot of different options. And one of them should be annotate. I wish I could like actually show my whole screen so you can see what I'm seeing. But the annotate tool should give you the ability to write some text or some draw. You can draw. I'm going to have you look at the stamp and you can pick kind of any stamp that you'd like. And what we'd like you to do is utilize a stamp and tell us where you're from. So we have all the lists of the counties here, and we are just curious on like where people are coming from. So you can do whatever you'd like. You can draw, or you can write a circle around it, or a stamp or something like that. But whatever you'd like to use. And my mouse isn't working, so my stamp would be at York County, because that's where I live. Thanks, Caity, for putting a second stamp for me. I appreciate it. So great. We have folks from Cumberland, Sagadahoc, and York. So that's wonderful. Oh, and then Kennebec too. Perfect. Thank you. I'm glad somebody else put their star on there. And so when moving to the next page, what I'll do is just clear the drawings. There we go. And then we'll pop my mouse. What is happening? I'm so sorry, everybody. And then we'll pop to the next slide. Caity, I'm so sorry. Everything's like frozen. Oh my goodness. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Now I'm going to hand it over to Caity.
Thank you. So first we are going to talk about what to prepare for. So to frame this for us in Maine, we took a look at the Maine State Hazard Mitigation Plan. So the Maine State Hazard Mitigation Plan was updated in 2019. And the natural hazard mitigation planning is a process that is used by states, tribal, and local governments that engages stakeholders and identifies hazards and vulnerabilities, and then develops a long-term strategy to reduce risk and future losses. And then in emergency management, we implement the plan and take advantage of grant funding that is based on these risks. So if you are curious about more detailed information about natural hazards in Maine, I highly recommend this plan. It is really detailed. It takes a look at the geography of Maine and the climate, as well as population demographics and governance, and really takes a comprehensive look at natural hazards. The state plan is also updated by using the county hazard mitigation plans. So all 16 counties in Maine create a county hazard mitigation plan that they update about every 3 years. And this is also a data-driven planning process that takes a look at our risks and our vulnerabilities, as well as our capabilities and our strengths. So as I said, it's based on the county plans. It's also driven by other data such as historic emergency declarations. The Maine Emergency Management Agency takes a look at records on dams and their safety, and looks at other data and reports, and really partners with all community stakeholders and state agencies and partners. So here you see a slide from the natural hazards risks in Maine. So today we are going to combine numbers 3 and 4 and talk about the top 3 hazards in Maine being wildfire, flooding, and severe weather, kind of combining summer weather and winter weather as they have some of the same characteristics. So first, we'll start with wildfire risk. And an estimated 92% of all forest fires in Maine are man-made, and that's either intentionally or accidentally. So one way to really mitigate the wildfire risk is public education and care in preventing forest fires, as well as effective prosecution of arsonists. So the remaining 35% of forest fires are actually ignited by lightning. And Maine is the most heavily forested state in the country, with 90% of our state being covered in forest. And with our increase in droughts in recent years, being prepared for wildfire is extremely important. So Maine has a wildfire weather report that is updated every day at 9 a.m. And there's the link there in case you want to save it and check it. This is a grab from this morning. So thankfully today, everything is at low risk of fire, but this is one tool that you can use to understand the wildfire risk to your area. So how do you prepare your home for wildfire risk? First, you do want to know your wildfire risk, and you can reference this map and other online resources, as well as talking with your local fire department. You can thin and maintain the vegetation around your home. So all vegetation is fuel for a wildfire, and some shrubs and trees are more flammable than others. So it's important to take a look around your property and around your home. And first, you want to create a 30-foot safety zone around your house. So you want to keep the volume of vegetation within the 30 feet of your home to a minimum. And if you live on the hill, you want to extend this zone on the downhill side, because fire spreads rapidly uphill. The steeper the slope, the more open space you will need to protect your home. So in this 30-foot zone, you want to remove vines from the walls of the house, move shrubs and other landscaping away from the house, prune bushes, branches, and shrubs within 15 feet of chimneys and stovepipes, remove tree limbs within 15 feet of the ground, thin a 15-foot space between the tree crowns. Replace highly flammable vegetation such as pine, evergreen, and fir trees with lower growing and less flammable species. You want to replace vegetation that has living or dead branches from the ground level. These act like as ladder fuels for approaching fires. And clear the area in this 30-foot zone of leaves, brush, dead limbs, and fallen trees. Next, you want to create a 100-foot safety zone where between the 30 feet and the next 100 feet from your home, you are also reducing and replacing as much of the flammable material as possible. You also want to take a look around your home and move combustible materials away from your house. So your firewood should be stacked 100 feet away and uphill from the house. And you should keep your gas grill and propane tanks at least 15 feet away from your house. You want to enclose high-risk spaces, so any sun decks or porches that are open underneath, to enclose those and clear leaves, trash, and other combustible materials away from beneath sun decks and porches, as that could fuel additional fire. You want to have your chimney covered with spark arresters that will stop sparks, which are created from 12 gauge welded or woven wire mesh screens. And you want to use siding and roofing materials on your building that are made of fire resistant materials. So those are the best preparedness actions to prepare for fire. Turning next is flooding, which especially being in Cumberland County and in Portland, I know in Portland, we're much more focused on flooding preparedness, as that is our greatest risk here. So for flooding preparedness, and as we go and talk about other severe weather storms, hurricanes, flooding is a common hazard that comes from many different severe weather events. So you really want to know your property well and your risks. So it may be simple, but taking a good look at your home and thinking about your flood risk will really go a long way. So if you have gutters on your home, gutters and keeping them maintained can help reduce the damage to your home. You may want to retrofit your home, and FEMA has many tips available on their website if you want to do a deep dive on retrofitting and dry floodproofing your home. Both of these could be more costly with some less expensive options for dry floodproofing your home, which makes it watertight and protects the inside of your home from flood damage. You may want to install sewer backflow valves. So some storms can cause sewer lines to back up into the drain pipes of your property. So you would want to check in with a plumber and talk about installing a backflow valve to make sure that does not happen at your property. If you have below grade floors, you may want to install a sump pump that is used to divert water away from your home when the groundwater accumulates on your property. You may want to raise electrical system components. So if you have switches, sockets, circuit breakers at the lower level of your home, you want to make sure that those are raised about a foot above your flood level. And if you're not sure of what your flood level may be in your area, you can look at FEMA's flood insurance rate maps, and those have are geographical pictures of the flood map in your area. You may also want to raise your appliances and utilities. So you could consider elevating your major appliances that you might have in your basement or on your first finished floor. Washers, dryers, water heaters, and furnaces can be raised on cement blocks. You can also anchor your appliances or protect them with a flood wall or shield or covering. You also want to consider what is outside your home and anchor and raise outdoor equipment. So if you leave equipment outside during a flood, it could get washed away and damaged, or it could damage your home. And also, in taking a look at your property as a whole, consider using permeable paving around your home and using paving stones or pea stones, or just gravel instead of paving your yard, which will, for your driveway, which will allow for the water to flow better. And right before a flood, if you're in your home and you're alerted that a flood is on the way, there are some precautions you can take right away if there's time to do it safely. You can take time to move furniture and rugs to a higher floor or raise them off the ground. If you know how to correctly and safely do so, you can shut off your electricity and the main power switch to your home and close the main gas valve if you are evacuating. It's also important to know that flood insurance is most often a separate insurance from your homeowner's insurance. So if you do live in a flood-prone area, you do want to purchase flood insurance in addition to your homeowner's insurance to make sure any potential losses are covered after an emergency. Hayley's going to talk more in a little bit about preparedness kits, but being prepared for flooding is very important. Also, understanding how long it would take you to evacuate and what your route will be, which I know Hayley will also talk more about. It's very important that if you are told to evacuate or if evacuation is suggested for your area, that you do so before the storm comes and not during or after the storm, when it may be more dangerous and too late to evacuate. And the phrase to remember for flooding is turn around, don't drown. So now we'll talk about extreme storm preparedness, which is going to be for both winter storms, which we're more accustomed to here in Maine, but also severe summer weather, which we are getting more increasingly. So hazards we face with extreme storms are high winds, extreme precipitation, blizzard conditions, lightning, hail, and ice. So we want to be prepared for downed trees. So you need to be prepared for the possibility that you may not be able to go where you want to go. So if you've sheltered in place for an emergency, downed trees could block the roadways and make it difficult for you to get out until authorities have cleared the way. They may also keep you trapped close to home. I remember I had a friend who was living on a camp road out in Harpswell a few years ago, and he lived there year round, but very few homes on the street were occupied year round. And in a late fall storm, there was an amazing amount of downed trees there, and he was actually trapped on his property for several days because of the number of trees that had fallen. And he needed, thankfully, a family member with an extra vehicle came and brought it to the other side of the trees so they could get out on foot and get to the other vehicle. But it could be numerous days before trees are cleared, especially in some more rural areas. We also want to be prepared for power loss, which I know Mainers are hardy and generally well prepared to go a few days without power. But that may mean having a generator, making sure your generator is tested annually, and making sure you have enough fuel for your energy, for your generator. Also be prepared for flooding, which we just talked about. We want to be prepared for blowing debris. So thinking about the high winds outside and securing any furniture that may be outside, moving things inside if possible. Also, lightning as a hazard if you're going to be outdoors at a recreational event, a sporting event, or if you're camping or hiking, then you want to be prepared to go inside. And something like a gazebo or tent is not safe enough. So if you know there's a threat of extreme weather and thunderstorms with lightning possible, you really want to be prepared ahead of time, because if you hear thunder, it's already a bit too late and the risk of lightning is there. So the key phrase for that is, if thunder roars, stay indoors. And talking about extreme cold or extreme heat. Extreme heat is something we have faced more and more each year as our climate warms in Maine. So you want to make sure to never leave people or pets in a closed car on a warm day. If you don't have air conditioning in your home, do consider going to a cooling center. Cooling centers are places that municipalities frequently open up as a place where members of the public can come and cool off. Because actually just a fan in your home is not enough to cool you down on these high heat days. So you do need some air conditioning. And it's also important to know that air conditioning takes some time to work. So you really need to have the air conditioning on before the high heat comes, so it has time to cool down your home and keep it cool. Some other ways to keep cool are to take cool showers or baths, to wear loose, lightweight clothing, to use your oven less, to drink plenty of fluids and stay hydrated, and really avoid high energy activities or outdoor work, especially during the middle of the day if possible. It's also important to learn and recognize the symptoms of both heat illness as well as extreme cold, hypothermia, and frostbite. So you want to know those symptoms and take action if you or your loved ones are experiencing any of those. And just one more thing on weather. You do want to be able to prepare your home to keep out the cool with insulation. You can use caulking and weather stripping. You're going to keep your pipes from freezing, and install smoke alarms and carbon monoxide detectors with battery backups. And if you do use a generator, of course, always use it outside and never inside. Also, you want to stay off of roads if possible, and limit your time outside in cold weather and wear layers of warm clothing, and watch for signs of frostbite and hypothermia. All right. It's also important to be prepared for wherever you will be. So if you noticed, Hayley and I both live in York County, but here we are working in Portland. So we work somewhere actually very different from where we live. And here on the right, you can see Maine's climate divisions. So just recognize that where you start your day and where you spend your day might have different conditions, and know what those may be and know the differences. So I know where I live is actually a little bit on the inside of that southern interior, and where I work is in that coastal zone. So the weather at my house can really be very different from the weather at my office, and I need to be prepared for both of those. Also, if you're traveling, maybe you've been finally ready to go on that road trip you were planning a year and a half ago and just haven't gone on yet. Keep in mind that the threats where you're going could be very different from where you are, and to not just check your local forecast, but to check the forecast and understand the risks of your destination and all along the way.
It sounds like a no-brainer, but we've heard pretty tough stories about people, traveling places and not checking the weather, maybe in Louisiana when a hurricane is coming, or just checking the weather here in Maine and being like, oh, it's beautiful. It's very different. And so it sounds like a no-brainer, but that's another thing to keep in mind. And so Caity mentioned a little bit before talking about, and Heather also mentioned that our weather is starting to maybe look a little bit different here in Maine than it did quite a, just a few years ago. And so a couple things to keep in mind are, Maine's annual temperature is increasing. And so like Caity mentioned, we're a hardy state, and we're ready for power outages, especially in the winter time. But power outages in the summertime are becoming more and more frequent, and we're getting these extreme heat days more and more frequently than we've ever had. And we will continue to see that increase, as we really start to see some of the impacts of climate change. And so just to kind of keep those things in mind, if you don't have an AC right now, maybe start to kind of be thinking about the long game with an AC, and maybe trying to put some money away or something like that and save for an AC. There are also, really great incentives at the state now about AC and heat pumps and things like that, where they will actually subsidize the cost of an AC or something like that, because they realize how important it is. And it will be, it's one of those things that a basic need. You will need air conditioning at some point, just knowing how hot things are getting. Increased extreme weather can really lead to numerous things, but a few things are, additional storm injuries and deaths. We're seeing a lot of winters now that we're getting that crazy cold that comes in and freezes a lot of things. And so now roads are slippery, or, walkways are more slippery, or things like that. We might have more outbreaks of waterborne diseases. And so kind of being cautious about, especially when it's really hot, going swimming in a potentially place where there might be some, an algae outbreak or something like that. So starting to keep those things in mind. And then of course, increased power outages. And that really is a concern for your heat, your air conditioning, and really your ability to keep food good for longer periods of time. And so that's another thing to think about. So when Caity was mentioning, you might want to think about getting a generator or something like that. Also making sure that, your basic things are connected to that generator. So your heat or your AC or your refrigerator, those are the really important things, not necessarily, your hair dryer or your outlets or something like that, that you might, you want to make sure your really important things are plugged into that generator. And then shorter Maine winters and longer summers. I did want to just put in a little interesting thing about tick-borne diseases. I know that's not an emergency, but it is something to kind of think and keep in mind when you're maybe spending some more time outside, even in some of the fall when we think it's colder, but we're having these longer summers, and we're having these days in the winter that are really warm, and those can really encourage ticks and those types of bugs to start, to come back out and to start breeding. And so we have ticks for longer, and we have them when maybe we don't think we have them. So just something to keep in mind, not necessarily an emergency, but wanted to put that point in here. Did I miss anything, Caity? I think I got it all.
And our focus today is on natural hazards, but I did just want to mention other types of hazards to be prepared for, which are more likely to be prepared for while you're out in the world or at your workplace. And those are technological hazards, which would result from things like a hazardous material release, a transportation accident, a bridge or building collapse, and then also adversarial or human-caused events that we have to prepare for, such as terrorism, active assailant, bombing, criminal threats, and cyber threats. So there's some great resources online if you're interested in learning more about those. And again, most often more for the workplace, but also cyber threats are becoming increasingly more prevalent as we become more dependent online. So very important for you to be aware of those risks at home as well as at work. So now I'll talk about some ways to be informed. And we would like to know, how do you usually find out about an emergency?
So we were hoping that you could use the annotate tool again, and just kind of put little, either, little icons or something around kind of where you typically find out about these types of things. So, and if you need a quick reminder of the annotate tool, it's up towards the top of your screen where it says I'm sharing my screen, and you can kind of click on little things. So I'm seeing, great, awesome. And I'd kind of love to just hear a little bit from folks, what is something that maybe what do you hear from the most? I can tell you that my whole family hears from me the most in an emergency situation. I am the one sending all the news clippings and all the weather apps and all the weather notifications and all of that stuff. So family and friends is really big in my circle. But obviously I use some other things, but I'm so curious, where do people kind of hear their big news about this type of stuff? If you just want to take yourself off mute, chime in. Anybody?
This is Becca. Hayley. I would say the news for sure. And then, getting preparedness emails from Maine Response in case they need volunteers or other listservs like that. I'd say those are the biggest ones for me.
Wonderful. Anybody else want to chime in? Heather?
Hi, this is Heather. I'm more the family person where they're more plugged into the news than I am because I don't have time to watch it. And they're like, yeah, there's a storm coming. I'm like, there's a storm coming?
Yes.
So don't follow my lead.
Doreen, did you take yourself off mute?
I did. I have an app that usually gives me emergency updates.
Awesome. What app is that?
I knew you were going to ask me that.
Oh, shoot.
I think it's Maine. I think it's from Maine.gov.
Okay. Awesome. And I'm laughing a little bit at the water cooler talk because we had these tornado warnings a few weeks ago, and I'm sitting in my office, right next to Caity, and I'm plugging away, and she goes, "Did you hear the tornado warning?" And I'm like, I have no clue. So I'm also one of those people that are water cooler talks too. So I don't necessarily have an organized way of finding this out. So I think this is a good conversation. Thank you all for sharing.
Yeah, and Valerie shared that she loves the City of Portland's updates and texts. So that's great to hear.
That's super great to hear, Val. Thanks.
And I work from home now because of COVID. So no water cooler. I'd have to talk to myself.
Sometimes that's just frowned upon, isn't it, Doreen?
Yes, sometimes it is.
All right, I'm going to clear all the drawings. Okay, great. Now I think we can hopefully get to the next screen if my mouse decides to work. Oh my gosh, come on. Sorry, Katie. I'm really trying here. It does not. There we go. Okay.
All right, so we will talk about how to be informed of different threats. So we just heard how we're usually notified, often from the media, or some of us have some apps on our phone. So thinking about some different ways to be notified and maybe for different threats. So phone apps, we know there's a few different, kind of pick your favorite news station or weather app and you will get pushed just weather or weather and news. So those could be ways of getting alerted to more than just weather events. Email, I think Becca mentioned that she gets notifications from Maine Response, and a plug for folks to sign up for Maine Response if they're interested in volunteering. We heard from Heather that her family is watching the news, so that's a great way to find out about what the media is sharing. And also weather radio. So if folks don't know about weather radio, NOAA has a weather all hazards radio, and it is a nationwide network of radio stations that broadcast continuous weather information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you do need a special radio in order to get the weather radio. So if you don't have that in your kit, which we'll be hearing about in just a minute, you should add one. And those broadcasts also include not just warnings, but also post-event information for all types of hazards that include natural hazards, environmental hazards, and safety alerts such as Amber Alerts or 911 telephone outages. And also think about how your notification might differ based on threat. So again, we're focused here on natural hazards, but there may be other ways to find out about other threats.
Is that good?
Yes. And in terms of getting notified, in many cases, you have to sign up for alerts. So I've included some of the alerting methods that I'm aware of for use in Maine. So multiple counties, including Cumberland County and I know Saginaw County also both use code red. I know York County uses a system called RAVE. Both of those work as reverse 911 to landlines, but if you want the alert to your cell phone, you do need to sign up and register with your cell phone. And I know that Code Red also has an app. Down in the left-hand corner are the Code Red images. I think they recently went through some rebranding. So if you're looking for it on your phone in the Play Store, that one on the left is the image that you'll be looking for. And if you do have that app on your phone, it actually works anywhere in the country that uses Code Red. So if you're traveling to the area and you have your location on, it is a location-based alerting service. My new favorite app is the FEMA app, which I am featuring here. I really like this app because it not only alerts you, but it also has preparedness actions. So Hayley mentioned the tornado alert that we just got recently, and you know, we don't have those a lot. So you may not know what to do during a tornado. And when I got that alert on my FEMA app, it allowed me to push a little button and see what preparedness actions I could take for a tornado.
Mm-hmm.
Val mentioned the city of Portland. We use Civic Ready at the city of Portland, and you can sign up there for alerts, and that will have all kinds of alerts. And when we open a cooling center, that is where we also push out that information. Nationally, there's also a national terrorism advisory system. And I just did want to mention that each county has an LEPC or local emergency planning commission. And that is a group that they're required under federal and state laws to coordinate the hazardous material response and preparedness activities in Maine. So they don't necessarily push out alerts, but if you wanted notification or if you wanted information about hazardous materials in your area, I suggest you turn to your county local emergency planning commission and find out what those risks are.
Hey, I have a quick question. Those top ones like Code Red and Rave, that list, are those useful for people that don't have apps, but maybe still have a cell phone or an email? Like can you talk about the medium for those?
Yeah, yes. So you could sign up, and I will say I'm much more familiar with Code Red just through working. We use this in the city of Portland. and the Cumberland County Regional Communication Center. So if there was a message that they would send out to reverse 911, you can sign up with just your cell phone number, and that message would come through as a call to your cell phone number. So you don't actually have to have the app installed on your phone for that to work. And I believe Rave works the same way.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and of course, the National Weather Service is the entity which provides us the most alerting information for weather events. So I just wanted to go through what those different alert levels look like. Sometimes the National Weather Service will provide a hazardous outlook, and that's just kind of a basic outlook at the potential hazards in the next 7 days. They may issue an advisory, so that will have specific information such as wind, fog, winter weather. So at this advisory level, it's just time to exercise caution and kind of get in the mindset that something may happen. Then a watch is issued for significant and hazardous weather is possible. So this is when you really want to be prepared for a hazardous weather event. And then a warning is when there's a significant and hazardous weather event that's either occurring or imminent, and that is when it is time to take action. And just thinking ahead, again, depending on where you are, one area may be in a watch while another is in a warning where it is imminent. So you've got to be prepared for those different levels. So let's take a pause and see if there are any questions before we talk about our preparedness kits and plans.
Thanks, Caity and Hayley. Does anybody have questions? You can feel free to take yourself off mute, or we've had a couple come through the chat that I'm happy to start us out with.
I have a lot of questions, but I'm gonna start with one because the other ones are related, I think, to what you're going to talk about next. What do you think? And again, these may be outside of your knowledge. I don't know enough to know if these are outside your knowledge area, but what do you think about things like paint, like dry lock, and does putting that in your basement, is that helpful? And should people be paying attention to building details, like the direction that their door swings open in case, for example, like their basement floods, and if it opens out toward the water and there's pressure, like, are those things people should be paying attention to? So I know those are a little wonky, but as you were presenting, that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, and I will drop in the chat this fact sheet for the 10 ways to help prevent flood damage, which has kind of further links to retrofitting and dry floodproofing. And I would say that if your home is in a FEMA designated flood zone, that those are good actions to take, especially if you have witnessed seeing some water coming into your home, then those are especially important actions to take.
Thanks, Caity.
If we don't have any more questions on that one, I wasn't sure in the chat. I think you had answered them as we went. So I think we'll skip to the next section. And so the next section, as Caity had mentioned, it's really just about thinking through your situation, your scenario, your family, where you are, and building a kit or kits with the needs of you and your family members in mind. And so we kind of broke it down into really kind of thinking through the what, the where, and the who. And so kind of thinking through what you really want in your kit. And this might, when we talk about who, you might add certain things, but when we're talking about the basics of what a kit should entail, we're talking about also like the general rule is 3 days. So when we talk about these basic needs, you're going to want things for about 72 hours, because that's kind of the estimation of when help could potentially arrive. But 72 hours. That's a long time. And so you want to kind of think about water for both drinking and sanitizing. And so the rule of thumb with that is really 1 gallon of water per person per day. And so if you have 2 people in your family, we're going to want 6 gallons of water. And, so kind of just making sure that you have enough drinking water and hand washing, cleansing water to get you through that 3 days. You also want to think about non-perishable foods. And so that might look like canned foods, protein bars, dried fruits, that kind of thing that you can easily store and prepare. Rice, pastas, sometimes things like that might be really good to kind of hold on hand, because they don't go bad in your pantry. And so you can even kind of start building this into your just like daily living too, of just kind of having a stocked pantry. If you I don't have a pantry. I just have like a couple shelves where I'm like, okay, I make sure that I have certain cans that I know we use a lot. We use a lot of pasta sauces or things like that I can just kind of rotate and just keep on hand. We do this a lot when we have winter storms. And so just kind of thinking about that, for really just kind of having that stuff on hand. Clothing, we here in Maine also have to think about warm clothes. So do you have things like, extra blankets or sweaters or, things that are warm? Do you have a sleeping bag for each person? Do you have these kinds of things where if it is cold, you're going to have enough to keep your body temperature where it needs to be, and you're not worried about hypothermia and things like that. So kind of keeping clothing in mind. First aid kit. I think about this a lot, and having an unopened first aid kit or a first aid kit that is separate than your regular household first aid kit. How many times have we gone in to grab a Band-Aid and there's no Band-Aids left in our first aid kits, or we can't find something that we want. That's what we're trying to avoid in this case. So, making sure that you have something very separate that is for an emergency. So you want to also include face coverings or face masks, just in case the air is contaminated. We all should have those probably around our house now more than ever. So throw a couple of those in your emergency preparedness kit. You want to think about medications, possibly if you're, you need certain medications, or somebody in your family needs extra medications, keeping that on hand, or your prescription. Tools and equipment like, duct tape, plastic sheeting, or really heavyweight garbage bags, manual can openers, wrenches or pliers, a whistle, or some type of like noise making machine, flashlight and batteries. Katie, you had mentioned that weather radio, and phone chargers, and ways to make sure that you are able to keep in contact. And documents, really important family documents, birth certificates, maybe passports. Like I said, prescriptions might be good to kind of keep that prescription on file. Things like that you might be needing to show. You want to keep these in your house. You will also want to keep possibly a to-go bag. And so you might have a bag that you need to run, and you might need to evacuate. And so you might need to grab something very quickly and get out. And so you might want something that's a little bit more portable for you to get out, or keep your container in a portable fashion to help you when you need to get out or evacuate. You also might want to keep a smaller version of this in your car. So certain things that, if you're driving down the road and you hit a snowstorm, things like that, of, wanting to make sure that you have warm clothing in your car, or you have, certain things that you might need like water if you get stuck, some protein bars for snacking, again, if you get stuck. So kind of thinking about where you might want to keep kits like this. And then some additional considerations might be around the people that make up your family or they make up your household. And so you might want to think about, do you have infants or children or babies? And they might need formula. You might want to keep that on hand, and diapers. Babies go through a lot of diapers. You might want to keep things like that. Pets, you might want to consider things that your pets might need. They might not be allowed inside shelters or cooling centers or warming centers. And so considering what they might need in that event might also be important. And then if you have folks that are either elderly or they're disabled and they need some extra adaptive equipment like a walker or things like that you might want to keep, maybe some spare parts or some extra things like that to keep around and part of your kit. So just really, it's really about thinking about your family, your situations, and kind of adapting your basic needs kit to fit some of those considerations.
Hayley, quick question. Sorry to interrupt you. What should that all go in? I mean, that's kind of a lot. Does that you probably don't want it like in a rolling suitcase? Should it be in a dry, like a dry bag you might use like on a kayak? Like what type of bag should that or things should all this go into?
That's a great question, Becca. And I think a lot, it can be dependent on your family. And so, but I know that I keep a lot of my stuff in a container, like a hard-sided container. And so I keep that and I keep it higher off the ground. And so, if there's a flood or something, my emergency preparedness kit is not on the ground. And so, so I might keep it in like a second floor or something like that, or just up on, on a closet, something like that. A bag might be, you might want to keep multiple bags or backpacks inside of a hard-sided container. So you might want to put some clothing or stuff like that and have like a tools and equipment bag inside that hard-sided container, or maybe you have a smaller to-go bag and that is in a, like kind of thinking through, okay, if there was a flood, do I want my emergency kit in the basement on the ground? No. And so kind of thinking through that a little bit. Where, do I have a mud room that I can easily get out? Think about your house a little bit. And then I also keep one in my car, and I do have a smaller kit with a blanket, some protein bars, a flashlight, a trash bag, and some other things. And I keep that in a hard-sided kit in my vehicle also.
With those documents or copies of important documents in a resealable plastic bag, just in case those get wet, keep those extra safe.
Great question, Becca.
Thank you. It was very helpful.
And so we kind of just wanted, I know we're running up against a little bit of time. So Caity, should I actually just maybe skip this a little bit so we can get to the communication plans?
Or just a quick thing, what we think we might be able to grab.
Cool. So we kind of wanted to just really quickly, again, using that, maybe not the annotate tool, but just verbally, what kinds of things do you have in your house already? Are you ready? I know that I don't have 1 gallon per person per day in my home. And so that's something that, I might want to think about. So are there certain things that you already have? Seeing Becca has an unopened first aid kit. That's good. So you won't be running into my situation when I ran in and was bleeding and my husband had used the last Band-Aid.
All I know is I have a really long to-do list for this afternoon.
I know that I
Go ahead,
never
Kate.
had the food stockpile that I dreamed of didn't come to fruition until March 2020, but the COVID pandemic has sure changed my stockpile from some things I might eat sometime to a very robust stockpile of things we eat all the time, although the balance of diced tomatoes to black beans may be a little off.
So exactly that point, Caity, Caity keeps a lot of like things that she eats on hand. And so that she can just use it as it's starting to, maybe the expiration date is creeping up and there hasn't been an emergency. That's great. And so now she can just use that to feed her family that day. But just think about things like that, things that you use every day.
Sorry, I have another question.
Please.
For the water, I mean, that can be pretty heavy for people too. Or are things like a camelback or some type of another way of carrying it besides a jug a good way to go, or not? Because I don't know, for some reason that may not be a good way to go.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the water also is thinking about being at home. And I mean, I would say yes, whatever you can keep the water in.
Good point.
I had kind of an enlightening presentation to me a few years ago, which is also like, you don't have to go out and buy that many gallons. But maybe if you have something, you can put a little bleach, like a little teaspoon of bleach in water and really clean out that container and then fill it up in an emergency. So I know I have kind of refilled water in my basement, stashed away. And then headed into the winter, I will clean out those bottles and refill them instead of just spending the money to buy more water, because I don't drink bottled water usually used from the tap. Also, if you live in a small space, you can find places to kind of stash some of this stuff. So maybe under your bed or in the top of a closet or somewhere to really just kind of stash away some of those extra water containers.
Thanks, Caity. And so the last kind of section that we wanted to cover, and I'll cover it briefly, is the types of plans that you might want to have. And this is really an incredibly important aspect of this, because you can have all of these things in place. You can have your whole kit, but if your family's not communicating on who has to grab what, or who's responsible to meet where, or who starts the chain of communication, there's a lot of breakdown that can happen, and your family might not also be together when something like this happens. So do you have a plan to contact each other? So some of the important considerations you might want to have are having maybe an out of town contact. Do you have a family member that lives a little further away? Do you have a friend? Local utilities may go down in a disaster, but oftentimes long distance phone calls may tend to still work. And so it is helpful to have somebody that maybe is not in your immediate area, because they might also be experiencing the same disaster or emergency you might experience if it's a natural kind of disaster. So have something like that in mind, decide where you might meet, and then also have a list of important contacts. So who's your insurance provider? Who are your employers? Who are your utilities? Where do your kids go to school? Having a list like that is really important so that everybody is on the same plan and everybody can know who to contact. Another plan you might want to have is a shelter in place plan. So if you cannot leave your house because of poor air outside or something happening outside of your home, the idea of a shelter in place is making your home or your room a safe place to stay. And so that might be, making sure that your air conditioning or your forced air systems or things like that are turned off, so they're not bringing air from the inside. This might be putting plastic around your doors and your windows to keep any type of debris out. Even in wildfires, you might want to do that because the air can get so thick with ash. And so kind of thinking about making your home a safe place. And I know it's 1 o'clock, so I know we're out of time. The last thing is an evacuation plan. So now you have a communication plan, how your family is going to communicate. You have an at-home plan if you need to stay home, and now you have a getaway plan. And so this is about how you are maybe different destinations that you might be able to meet with your family. Keeping a half tank of gas is incredibly important, that I never do, but I need to get better about that. Being familiar with different routes. So driving around town, you might see emergency evacuation route, or you might see signs about evacuation routes. Understand those routes, and then understand alternative routes, because those could get busy and blocked, and you might know this is when to talk to grandma and know about the little side roads that might be able to get you where you need to go. And then obviously take your kit. And then we had a couple notes about recovery. And so one quick thing is that if you do evacuate, do not return home until officials say it is safe to do so. We've seen horror stories out west with wildfires and people returning too quickly. Take pictures of any damage that happens in your home. Know your insurance coverage. American Red Cross, know them. If you have a fire at your house, they will come help you. American Red Cross is the way to go. They will help you. And then care for yourself and your loved ones. Emergencies take a lot of toll on our mental health. And so it's just incredibly important to be able to take care of yourself. And preparation is a very big part of resiliency and being able to recover from something. So if you're really well prepared, hopefully you'll be able to recover better. That's it. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. I know we covered a lot.
Thank you, Caity and Hayley. That was a great presentation, and as I admitted throughout, it was really informative and provided a lot of great information. So I know most folks have had to hop off at this point, but if you do have any follow-up questions, they provided their email, or you can reach out to me or Becca and we'll send them along. We'll also follow up with a recording in the presentation and some resources for everybody, and that'll be on our website as well. So thanks again to you two.
Thank you.
Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.